Hello lovely people, welcome back to the channel, and today we have come back to episode 2 of our food app. And in this episode, this is what our app is going to look like at the end of the day when we complete this episode, because we're going to make our app truly functional. We'll set up our dependency injection with Koin, we'll wire up our navigation, and we connect our app to Firebase and implement both Google and guest sign-in. So by the end of this episode, this is what we're going to have as our output. So as you can see, we can log in with our Google account successfully into our home screen, right? So likewise, letting our users log into our application as guests to buy the stuff we're selling. So if the user clicks this browser guest, they are also sent to the home screen without asking them for any authentication. So if you're excited, let's get started. To begin with, we're going to create some classes that are going to be the entry point of our application, which is going to be our application class. So this application class is going to be in this package, the burger restaurant app package. So that's where we're going to put our application class. So this is going to be burgers application class. Yeah, don't ask again, please add to Git. So here is going to inherit from the application class. We need to import application, I guess, the Android application. Okay, so now that we have implemented our application class, right now we're going to override on create in order to start Koin, which is our dependency injection that we're using for this application. So right here, we're going to call override on create. Here under the super, we're going to start Koin. I think we'll initially in the previous episode, if you have not seen it, where we set up our dependencies, we have already imported this Koin library in the last episode. So if you have not seen that episode, you can check it out. This at our burgers application. So this is how then we set our modules, which is going to be our application modules, app modules that we have not created yet. So we're going to create that shortly. So in order to create this our app module, we're going to have a package that we'll call our DI package. So let's create another package here that is going to be called DI. So inside the DI, we have the module file, which is going to be our Koin module file. So we'll call that modules. And here we're going to create a variable that we'll call app modules, like I've just called in the application class just before, and we'll assign that to module. Then inside this module, we're going to nest all our things like repositories, our view models, and some auth clients that we're going to be needing later in the future. So right now, as you can see, that error should be gone now. So we need to import the app module. So this is our application setup. So now this is going to be the entry point of our application. And for our application to know that, we're going to go back to our manifest file where we have to select the application name, and we'll select our burger application just like this. And before we leave here, let us also initiate the users, the Android network access permission, and also internet permission, so that we don't have to do that later in the future, because we're going to be needing all this later in the future. That's it for now, and we can close that down. We'll have to set up our navigation. So for we to do that again, we need to create another package that is going to be our navigation package. Or let's create another package called features. So inside the features, we can now add our UI package again. So now inside this UI, we can now add our navigation package. I will call that nav. We're trying to use the MVVM architecture. Here we have our nav package. So this inside is our nav package. We're going to have a sealed class inside this navigation package that is going to contain our screens. So here there is no option for sealed class, so we're going to call these screens and we're going to make that a sealed class. Inside the sealed class, let's annotate this with at serializable. Inside this, we're going to have some data object that is going to be, first of all, our app will start with the splash screen, which we inherit from the screens class. Yeah, just like this. So let's just duplicate that 2 more times, and this one is going to be our auth screen, and this is going to be I will call this home graph, because we're still going to implement our navigation, bottom navigation inside this. So now we have this 3 screens here. So now that we've created our screen, we need to create our nav graph. So inside this same package, the nav package, we'll create our nav graph, which is going to be a composable file. So let's call it Burgers nav graph. I think that's a good name. So here we're going to create a composable file, which is going to be form. What did I call it again? Burgers nav graph. So Burgers nav graph is our composable file. So the parameters here is going to be the start destination, which is going to be the start destination of our app entirely. So this start destination is going to have the type screens, and we'll assign it to our screens dot splash screens, because that's the first screen we want the user to see once they download the app, once the app has launched. Okay, so under that we have to create a variable called our nav controller, which is going to control our navigation for other screens. This nav controller is going to be assigned to remember nav controller. I think we need to import that, add the dependency. Haven't we added this dependency before? Okay, that's still fine. So it's going to add that dependency for us and sync. Our project is syncing right now. We'll give that some time to finish up. Okay, that has finished up and everything seems to be fine with our projects. So now we create our nav host, which is going to have nav controller and the nav controller that we have initially created as variable up there. Then set our start destination to be our start destination above as well. So now in the body, we're going to create the individual composables that is going to make up our screen and finally our navigation system. So here we'll call screens dot splash screen, which is where we want our app to start from, and inside that we're going to create, this is where we can now call our screens, right? So now that we've set this up, this skeletal structure up here, what we need to do next is, because the initial entry point for our application, for Empty Compose application, is our main activity, we now have to call our nav graph from here. So let's clean this up a little bit. We don't need the scaffold anymore. So we can just call Burgers nav graph here, just like this. So now if we launch our app, it might crash because we have not created the screen, the splash screen yet. So now we can quickly do that. I can add the splash screen as a top level package in the feature. We can call this splash. So inside the splash, let's create a composable file that is going to be our splash screen. So now we have created that. So at composable, then font is equal to splash screen. We're going to, let's just add a column to make it look nice when it displays. And here we're going to add a text as well. Text is welcome to splash screen. So let's set this to align to center. So we use modifier dot fill max size, then dot padding. Let's set the padding to 24.dp and set the vertical arrangement to arrangement center. Then the horizontal alignment should be alignment center horizontally. So I guess with that, we go back to our nav graph, then we call our splash screen. So import that. Yeah, that's the right one. So now if we launch our app, we'll be able to locate the splash screen accordingly. We'll give that a moment to finish up. Yeah, so as you can see, our app can successfully navigate to our splash screen, which is awesome. So we have rightly set up our Koin dependency, which we started up in our application class. And the why I chose Koin for this project is because it's lightweight, simple, and compose friendly. And the next thing we can do now is to, if we have a look at our prototype from Figma, let's set up our splash screen to look just like this. Then we can now move forward to other things. Okay, so this logo here, we're going to animate it a little bit. So that's what we're going to do right now, so that once the screen launches, it expands, it pops up and goes back to the normal size. Okay, so let's do that. So we can stop this now and close that down so that we can rightly begin. Let us optimize and close this down as well. So now we're going to create our full responsive splash screen. Okay, so let me make this full screen as well. So now we have a test here which is not so up here. Let's create some scale, because I told you that logo is going to be animated, so we are going to scale it, create a scale, which initially we use remember. So initially we're going to use animate table, and we'll set the initial value to 0, which is 0 animation, 0f at the start. So I think we need to import animatable. Did I import the wrong one? So I think I imported the wrong one. This is supposed to be core.animatable. That's the right one. Okay, the error is gone now. Okay, so importing the right one is always essential so that I don't have issues. So the next thing is that we're going to use a launch effect to enlarge that logo. First of all, we're going to set the key to true, the key 1 to true. Then we add a block here. We don't need this body. Inside that block, we're going to call our scale that we just created up there. Then we'll set it to animate to. So what is the target value we want to set this animation to? We want to set it to, like, let's say 0.7f. So then the animation spec, what kind of animation do we want? How do we want it to behave? So the animation spec, we use twin, and in that twin, we set the duration to durations in millis, and we'll set that to 600, and also want it to ease in. The easing to be, so the easing now is going to be, want it to overshoot interpolator. So, and how much do we want it to overshoot? Let's set it as well to 7f, the tension to 7f, and also we need to call .get interpolation and set it to IT. So that is how our animation effect is going to happen, how we want it to display first of all as start. So now down here in the column, we'll set our padding initially for the text to be 24, which seems to be a bit too much. So let's just make this 1. Then let's set our background here. We need to set our background is yellow. So we set our background to brand yellow. That's the color we chose in our file initially. So now we have set everything to the column the way it should be. The next thing we need to do now is to set our image, which is going to be, we're going to need a text. So I'm not going to delete this. Let me just add an image assets up here. So the image is going to be painter resources, and this is going to be r.drawable. We need to import r. Yeah, it's this one. Yeah, so the drawable dot, I think is this one. We're going to set our content description, logo image. That was what it should be. Let's set the content scale. We'll set our content scale to fit. The next thing is to set the size, because if you look at the image, once again, the prototype, we kind of enlarge this a little bit more than this. Yeah, we see the difference later when we create the auth screen. Okay, so right here, we're going to use modifier to set that up, the size. So we'll set the size and we'll set our width, which should be like 440.dp. Then our height should be the same, so that it will be like a square kind of image. So okay, after the size, let's set some padding around, and let's just set it to 10.dp. Then let's set our scale, the scale that we've just created, and pass scale.value. So now we have set up our image to respond the way we want once our application is launched. So down here now, after that, we're going to add a spacer. The spacer is going to be the height. We're going to use height for the spacer because it's a vertical spacing that we need there. So let's set it to 25. Then after that, we can now add the big text that says, this big text here that says, are you hungry? So for we to do that, I like to put my string text in the string resources so that I can just call it up from there for screen readers. Okay, so let's duplicate this, copy that, duplicate it. Let's set it like 2 times. So this is going to be called the splash header. Splash header, yeah, that's better. That's a good name. So it says the question, are you, let me make initial capital, are you hungry? No, hungry, not hungry. Yeah. So this is going to be for the subtext. So splash subtext. We're going to say, it says burgers. What does it say again? Let's have a look. It says burgers will deliver the treat your palate is craving. Okay, so let's add that here. And burgers will deliver the treat can't resist. Let's use that. Let's take this out. This is not supposed to be a can't resist. Android Studio doesn't. We need to add an escape character to use this apostrophe and resist. Yeah, with that our test will come out as we want it. So this escape line, this new line, is just for the test to start on the second line, so it doesn't run from one end to another. Okay, so let's go back to our splash screen and access those strings. So here we're going to use string resources. What am I typing today? String resource, and we're going to pass R again dot string dot splash header. So let's style our text, and now our font family is going to be our initial family of Oswald. That's Oswald. Yeah. So then our font weight, let's set the font size to 24.sp, then set the font weight because we want it a little bit bold. We want it bold, not a little bit bold. So font weight dot bold. So that's our test. So the next test is the noun subtext. So let's just copy this and put it under. We don't need spacing. We use the natural spacing of column to do it. So here we just call splash subtext. Then the font here is going to be our body font, which is sentient variable font. Yeah, that's the font. So but this is going to be a little bit smaller, and we don't want it bold, so we want to use the natural text font, which is I think 16 or 14. We need to align the text to center, so text align dot center. So that's our second test done. So what's the next thing on our design? We need to add this button here. So and this button, if we check all our design, this is the only place this button was used, so there's no point recreating it. So we just create it in our splash screen. Okay, let's just come down here and create another composable. So that composable is going to be font. Let's call it a splash button. So here we're going to use parameter to style our button. Modifier, I mean the modifier, we're going to have a background color for our button, and on click we'll import the color. If we add the body, the error will go out and let us import the color, as you can see. So now we have imported color. Yeah, so then our on click is going to be an empty lambda. That's our button setup. So we're going to use Surface to create this particular button because we're going to add an icon to the button. So we can use button, we can use Surface, but let's use Surface to create this particular button. It's a one-off button, so we can play around all we want. So Surface, I think I imported the wrong Surface right there again. So yeah, this is the right one. Here we're going to use modifier equal to modifier dot let's fill maximum width, then let's add some padding. So let's add a general padding of 20.dp, then let's set it to align the vertical arrangement. We can't call vertical arrangement here, sorry. So here we're going to do the rounded corner shape. So here we'll call rounded corner shape and we set it to 99.dp. Then finally let's set the background color above. I need to add comma here. So now background color all set. Our surface is set now. So let's use row to add the text and the icon inside this surface. So let's set the row parameters and we're going to use modifier again and modifier dot to fill maximum width of the parent, and we'll set some padding as well so that our text will be rightly centered. Let's make this 20 and make this one 16. Okay, so now we can set our vertical alignment, then horizontal arrangement should be arrangement center, so that's with that our text and icon will be aligned properly in the center of the surface that we've created. So let's add a text here, and our text is going to, let's go to our string resources again and add another text. Undo that. Let me copy this one and just paste it here. So let's call that one splash button tests. Okay, btn test. Okay, so this one will say what? Let's order a meal, I guess. So we still need to escape this character apostrophe. All right, so let's go back and use string resources and we call r.string button text. That's right. Let's style our text again. So the color of our text should be text white as we have set up initially in the last episode. Then the font family, we are going to use the sentient variable font. Then let's set the size. Let's set that to font size dot regular. Let's set it to medium, I guess. Or do we have extra regular? Yes, I think that's like 16. Let's check what's extra regular again. Yeah, extra regular is 16. I guess that should work better. Okay, so now that's our test setup. So let's add a horizontal spacer that is going to, so that it will appear nicely, dot width, and let's set that to 24.dp. Then under that we should add our icon. So we use painter and painter resources, then we call our.drawable dot login icon. So down here our content description login icon. Okay, so down here we set our tint to be color.white. Okay, so this is our splash screen all set up. So let's quickly test that and see how we have done so far. I believe everything should work properly. Yeah, did you see that quick animation down there? That was quick, but he worked as expected. So down here, where is our button? Oh, my bad. We haven't called our splash button yet, so that's why it's not showing. So we need to add another spacer down here, then call our button. So let's call our button under the spacer. We'll call this splash button, right? So here, all we need is on click, and that will leave that as an empty lambda because we have not implemented that function yet. So let's relaunch our app and see if our button is showing as it should. Okay, amazing, isn't it? See, our button is showing properly, okay, and everything looks great in my opinion. Let's check our design and see. I'm feeling somehow about the paddings on both edge here. What was our padding here? So we added 24 padding on both end, and let's make this bottom padding. Let's make the padding, the spacer here, to be 100. Yeah, 100, 24, 24. Okay, so let's go back to our design and effect that. So the padding for our column is 24, and the spacer, the horizontal spacer here, the vertical spacer here is 100. Is that going to accommodate on our screen size? Because up here we specify the column fields. Okay, let's see how the changes affect our design and see if we need to tweak that a little bit more. Yeah, it looks better to me now. It looks a lot better to me now. Okay, so that's all done. Our splash screen is set up properly now. So the next thing we can do is to implement our auth screen. Here the user chooses how they want to continue, either by signing in using Google or browsing our app as guest. So let's set the screen up now. So we can close this down and close this up for now. Also close this down. Yeah, close this down. We might need this later because of those other tests that appear there. Then close this down for now. So right now we're going to create our auth screen. Our auth screen is going to be part of the feature package. So here we create a package named auth. In this auth, we're going to have a series of files that will be needed in this project. First of all, we're going to create our screen, and from there, after creating our screen, we're going to create our view models to handle our Google Auth UI client and also some Auth UI events that we'll be needing. Let's start with creating the skin of our auth screen. So we'll call that auth screen. Right. So now this is going to be a composable file. Let's start by creating our composable, and it's going to be function auth screen. So let's add a body to eliminate that error. Here we'll add the navigation parameter, but not yet. So let's just leave that as it is and create the body of our auth screen. So here we're going to use scaffold. So inside the scaffold, we're going to have some padding values, and here we're going to nest another column inside the scaffold, and in that column we're going to have some column parameters which we'll use modifier dot weight. We want this column, so this is going to fill the maximum size of the parent. Then add some padding. In the padding, let's add our padding value, then add a general padding of 24.dp. So inside that parent column, create another column. So inside this column, we'll still have some parameters as well, and we'll create a modifier. This internal column is going to take only 80% of the parent size. So, but we want it to also cover and fill the maximum width. So then set our vertical. Let's set the vertical arrangement to set to center, then horizontal alignment to also align to center. So after that, let's add our image icon, which is, let's have a look. So this image and this text that tells them to sign in to continue. Okay, so inside this image, we're going to import our image file, painter resource r.drawable. We need to import r again. So drawable dot buggers. So let's style this image a little bit. We're not going to animate this one here. So let's call this buggers icon, buggers logo. That's what it should be. Then the content scale for this one is going to be content scale dot fit again. Make it fit. Then let's set the size for this one. This is going to be a little bit smaller than the other one. So modifier dot size, and here we're going to set the width to 220.dp and also set the height to 130.dp, so that let's have a look at our image, our Figma design, so that this doesn't shoot up, because if you look at the size of this one, it's 265 by 265, but here if we make the same size, it's going to shoot out this text and send it very far away. So which is not what we want. We want it to be as close as possible. That is why we've set up this size for. So after that, let's add some text after our image, the text under, and that text is going to say sign in to continue. Let's do as usual. We'll go back here and produce our string. So here is going to be sign in text. So here is going to say sign in to continue. So let's call that here string resource r.string the sign in text. Okay, so let's style this a little bit and set the font family to be our Oxford font. Then let's set the font size to font size dot medium, right? I guess that should be a data size. After the text, what else do we have? We have our two buttons, the Google button and the sign in as guest button right here. So for we to create these things, like as you can see from our design, the browse as guest button appeared in so many places. So we're going to create that as a component, and even the Google UI button, we'll also create that as a component in case we need it somewhere later. Okay, so let's create those two components now, then continue. To create our components, we'll inside the feature package, we'll create another package called the component package. In this application, we're going to have a couple of more components apart from these two buttons. So inside there, let's start with creating the Google button. Okay, from our design, the Google button comes first. So here we have a gray background with some dark outlining, and we have our icon, the Google icon, and text. So let's create that again one more time. This is going to be font. It's going to be font Google button, and it's going to have some parameters. Let's add the body again to take away these errors. So it's going to have some parameters which will include, first of all, we'll start with our modifier, and we'll assign that to modifier, and after that we need set a loading state to know if the button is loading or not, because we're going to add some animated content later. You'll see that. So down here, why is this giving me error? So we need the compose UI modifier. The next thing we're going to add to our button is going to be our primary text. So this was not reflected in our design, but it's what we're going to do here, which is once the user clicks on this button and it prompts the one tap Google sign in, and we have selected the account during that initialization stage where it's making that connection with our Firebase for authentication. As the user is waiting, we want this to change to a circular progress indicator that tells the user to please wait, that we're trying to authenticate them to get them into the app, so that they don't think that things have gone wrong. Okay, so we're going to do that. So for us to achieve that, let's set a primary test here, which is going to be our sign in with Google primary test. Our secondary test is going to be, so it's a very good user experience, so that they know that something is happening on the background. So we're going to use Painter here, and it could be nullable. So if there is no icon, it should return null. Then we're also going to set the shape of our button to rounded corner shape, and we set that to 99 again because we want a full rounded corner. After that, the next thing is our background color, because we'll have that gray background there that we want to implement, and we're going to use color and we'll assign that to surface light. After the background color, we need to set a border color for the dark border that we saw right before, and we're going to use color again and assign our color to border idle, which is the dark gray border. Then our progress indicator color, we'll set that to color and assign that to icon secondary, because the progress indicator is also an icon on its own, icon secondary. And we should have on click because our button is going to be clickable. I'll set that to empty lambda. Right, so that's all our parameters. So after that, now let's now set a surface to remember the text, which of the text that is going to be populated on start, and when actions are performed like click, what other text. So with that, we're going to set a var that we'll call button test. We're going to set a var that we'll call button test by remember mutable state of, and we pass our primary test. So on initial load, our primary test should be the one that is populating our button. So then using launched effect to read the state, we'll set it to loading. So our loading is always false, so it's not loading, so it's going to be false. So then when it's false, then our button test is equal to, we set a condition to say that if loading, then you should set the secondary test, or else you should set the primary test. Okay, so that will control how our button is displayed. With that by the side, let's add a surface to set our button again, just like we did before. We'll use a surface, and in that surface parameter, we're going to use modifier and set our modifier dot. We want to clip the surface, and we'll pass the shape that we've already set above. Then let's set the border, and the width is going to be 1.dp. Then let's set the color. The color is still the border color we have set above, and the shape is also the shape that we've just set. So with that done, we also have to make our button clickable so that the user can click the button. So when the button is enabled, and when enabled is inverse of loading, so we call on click lambda here. So with that done, we can set up our color, the color of our button, to be the background color that we've set up there. Let's use a row to pass our test inside this surface, because it's going to be a horizontal display of our test. So inside this row, we're going to set the row parameters as well, which is going to be our famous modifier. Inside there, we're going to make it to fill the maximum width of the page, and also set some padding, and the padding, let's make it 24 again, 24.dp as usual. So then dot animated content size. So we're going to set animated content size so that it can adjust with because as you can see from the test, the first one is longer than the second, so that it can animate and contain the size, so that it doesn't look like something is missing because we've changed the length of the text. Okay, so alignment, center vertically. Then our horizontal arrangement is going to be arrangement.center as well. Then now let's call our animated content. So in the animated content, the target state is going to be loading. This should only happen when we're loading. Okay, then let's give it a name, we'll give it a name up here. Let's call it a loading state. In the loading state, so we'll set a condition to say if loading state is true, as it should be when clicked, then pass if icon, inverse of the icon So if icon is not null, then let's pass our icon. So let's use painter and set our icon as we have set above. Then content description, let's pass our Google logo as the content because that's the initial icon we want displayed. Then let's set the tint color to be unspecified because we don't want the color to be the Google icon to be color to be affected by the UI color. Okay, so now that we've set that up, so if the icon is not null, then we'll display our logo, our Google logo icon. But if not, then we should set our progress indicator to show that we're loading something on the background. And here we're going to use modifier and set modifier the size of our progress indicator to be 24 dp size because our icons are 24, I believe. Okay, so if we quickly have a look at our icons are 24. So you see our icons are 24 by 24 width and height, so the progress indicator should also match that. So now let's add a stroke width for our progress indicator. Stroke width is going to be 2 dp, and we add a color to be the progress indicator color that we'll set above here, which is the icon secondly, and I think is the brown color here. So that's it. It's our progress indicator and the icon swap that we intend to have. So after this, the animated content, we can now add a spacer to add our text. Our width is going to be 12.dp. Okay, so after that, we can now add our text. So our text is going to be the button text that we have set in the variable button text up here. So let's style it a little bit. So the color of our text is going to be the text primary, which I believe is our text primary color is black. Yeah, so that's going to be the color of our text. Let's make the font size to be regular. So our font size is regular. So this is our button completed. So if we call this button right in the authentication screen now, we will be able to see something. We're able to see our button right there. We'll need a spacer here. Yeah, we'll need a spacer here. Let's add it without a spacer and see how it will displace, because we'll use weight to displace it naturally. Let's see. So Google button. So here we have loading. Let's set that to empty lambda, or let's set some. So initially in our button, our loading is false. So let's just set our loading to false again. Then we'll set our on click, we set that to lambda as well, empty lambda. So if we launch our application now, we should be able to see our Google button displayed. So I think we can't see anything actually, because we have not set up our navigation properly yet. So this is not responsive because we have not called our auth screen. I just noticed that immediately I loaded up, but that's no problem at all. All we need to do now is to go to our nav graph right here, and inside our nav graph we'll set up our navigation. So let's go to our SplashScreen first of all and create a lambda there. So here we're going to add navigate to auth, and it's going to be an empty lambda. In this lambda here, so on the splash screen, once the splash button is clicked, let's navigate to auth. Okay, that's all set up. Then go to our nav graph here. So in our nav graph, we're going to add that lambda navigate to auth, and we're going to set that up. So controller.navigate. So we navigate to screens.auth screen like this. Once our user is navigated to the auth screen, we don't want when they click the back button to go back to splash, because they are done with that page already. already. So here we're going to pop up to screens.splash screen. So we want to pop off that splash screen once our user have successfully been navigated to the auth screen, so that they can go back to the splash screen. So let's check out what we've done and see if it works as planned. So when we click this, it's still not responding. What's the matter? Okay, there is no screen to navigate to actually. Our navigation setup is fine, but we have not created a composable for our auth screen, which we are supposed to create down here for it to, because when we're clicking that button, it doesn't find any screen. So let's create this quickly. So SplashScreens.auth screen. So inside here, we're going to pass our auth screen. Yeah, I guess it's this one. Yes, that's the one. Let's relaunch our app and see if we've corrected that. So our nav graph initially couldn't find the screen, and that's why the button is not responsive, because it doesn't know where to go. It's not working yet. I'll find out and let's see what the problem is. Okay, I've seen the error here now. The error is that this on click would not pass it on this surface, which is this entire button. So this, we need to pass clickable here to make the entire surface clickable. So now we pass on click here, and that will solve our problem, I believe. Let's pass this in a lambda. So that seems to be fine. Let's relaunch our app again. Fingers crossed everything will work fine now. That's some small mistakes that can keep you hanging for a very long time, but it's fine. That's how we learn. Okay, can you see that now our button shows as it should, but unfortunately there is no icon. Okay, first of all, we'll take that piece by piece and set it up right. And there is too much gap between these two buttons, which personally I don't like. Okay, so let's troubleshoot that. This image for the icon is too large for my liking, so I'm going to crop this image, so that's why it's pushing this text very far away. Okay, so I'm going to crop the image to trim it down, trim all these empty spaces down to get it to the right size, so that it will look like what we have in our Figma prototype here, something close to this. Okay, right now I have a better image that is cropped, so we're going to relaunch our app again and see. Yeah, you can see the text is properly closed up, which is better than what it was before. So let's go back to our auth screen. This Google button is supposed to be outside of this external column, so we're going to cut that out, and this is the end of the column. So if we paste that here, so that it will use the padding values of this external column and see if it does display it as we want it to, so that the button will be somewhere around here. So that's it. See, all fine now, right? So the button is properly displayed at the bottom here, which is exactly where we want it to be. So now we have a problem with our icon. So let's go back to Google button and see why we are having that issue, why our icon button is not displaying. So this is our icon. Have we set any button at all? No, we have not set the icon button in our auth screen. So part of the parameters that need to be set here is our icon, because we have not selected it before. So Penta resources, the ones I created, .image, .google logo. So that's it. So now our icon should display, because we did not add that initially. Nothing yet. Let's reload that. What color did we set our button? Because these are all the things that matters or determines how it displays. So the button for our icon color, the icon color is unspecified. That's the tint. Okay, so why is it not displaying again, even up till now? Let's go back to our Google icon and see that everything is fine. All right, so our Google button here, icon, is nullable. Yes, for the icon to show, this is supposed to be the inverse of the loading state, which should be true, because initially it's set to be false. That's why it's not showing. I think so. Let's see. Okay, I was right. This one. Yeah. So the icon is showing properly now and it's clickable. Okay. So now let's create the next component, which is the primary button. I will call it the primary button, which we can use to ask the user to log in, browse as guests down here. So let's set that button up before we now move to authenticating with Google. Okay, connecting our project to Firebase and then plugging all the authentication logic that needs to be done. So we go back to our component package and we'll add another composable file, which we'll call primary button at composable. So form primary button, and the primary button is going to have its own parameter as well. Let's add the body for this error to disappear. Then the modifier, will assign that to modifier as well. So this is redundant now and it's in the top level. Okay, so now let's add tests to determine what our button says, which is going to be a string, then an icon, just like we've done before in the Google icon painter, make it nullable. Okay, set that to null, import painter. Then we need to make sure our button is enabled, because by the time we start updating our user profile, we make the button, we will disable the button until the user updates the profile before it can be enabled. So we'll set that logic later. So let's set it so that we can reuse this button as many times as the need may arise. So here is secondary. We set that to another boolean and it's going to be set to be false. Then on click we set it to empty lambda again. So that's all the parameters we need for the button. Then now we'll call a button. So the button is going to have its own modifier assigned to the original modifier. So it's going to fill maximum width, and on click is going to be on click as we've set up above. Then enabled is going to assign enabled as well. Then we have the shape and we want a rounded corner shape as well, but this time around we're going to set the size to 12 dp, not 99. And colors, we need to set the different colors when it's enabled, when it's disabled, and all that. Okay, so button default dot button colors, and here we're going to set the container color. We're going to set that to, if it's the secondary button, we should use button secondary, else use button primary color for that. Okay, so then we have the content color, and we set the content color to text primary. Also we're going to set the disabled container color, and we're going to set that to button disabled color that we've chosen initially. So, and disabled content color as well, we set that to text primary, and we copy that's to reduce the opacity to 0.6 f. Okay, so that it will be grayed out, it will be faint to tell the user that something is required before they can use that button. So let's set our content padding to our padding values, and we'll set this to 20.dp. That's our button setup. So let's add the content of this button, which is going to be a test, and that test is going to have a test body, and we'll assign whatever test the button has we want for the button. Then the font size should always be regular, and the font weight should be medium, not bold. Let's set that to medium. So we're just doing all this according to how we've set it up here, so that it will stand out, as you can see. Right now we'll set the test. The next thing is to add the icon. Okay, so but before we do that, let's add some spacer so that it will be nicely spaced, because if you look at our design here, we have some spacing around around this text and this button. So if you check the spacing, it's 12. So let's add that spacing there, the spacer there, to make it look nicely. So the spacer modifier is equal to modifier dot, this should be width now, and we'll set that to 12.dp, and after that then we'll add our icon. So let's set a condition for the icon. So if icon is not null, then we should now place the icon. If it's the button that doesn't need icon, then we just make it null from the beginning so that the icon will not show. We set that up in our prototype, right? Dot size, and we'll set that to 14.dp, right? So then our content description should be button icon. So first of all, we need to pass our icon resource, which is icon. That's our primary button setup. Well, I guess so. So now we're going to call our primary button in our auth screen so that we can see that as well. So let's go back to our auth screen, and before we add that, let's add another spacer to space it nicely. Like in our design, let's check what we have here. 14, that's the space between them. So here we're going to add a height of 14, modifier equal to modifier dot height, and we'll set that to 14.dp. Okay, let's call our primary button here, and it doesn't need a body. So under here we need to initialize the test. And what does the test say? The test says sign in, browse as guest. That's what the test says. Okay, all right. So let's just add the test here. Do we need to put it in our string resource? We can do that as well, so that we maintain some consistency in our implementation. So guest test, let's just make it what it is. Okay, guest test. So now we'll call it browse as guest. Right, so let's go back to our auth screen, and we use string resource, and we call r.string.guest test. So after that, the next element is our icon, which is we'll use penta resource r.drawable. I think it's login again. Yeah, so then on click is going to be an empty lambda. We're going to implement that later. So let's give this a quick run and see how it looks before we can proceed. Okay, we have our two buttons here, sign in with Google and browse as guest. So as you can see, everything looks as it is in our design right here. So the next thing we need to implement here is to connect our project to Firebase so that we can implement this Google sign in and also to browse as guest. Okay, so that's the next one we'll go to now. Let's connect our project to Firebase. So we go to tools and we select Firebase here, and we go to the top. Here we have authentication. We can't find authentication with Kotlin here, so we can still authenticate with Java, I guess, and connect. Let's check. Okay, let's go back again. It's pretty much the same initialization for all of them, so I guess we can choose any one of them and still be fine. So let's use authenticate using Google. So even though this one specifies using Java, so let's connect our project to Firebase, and it's loading up. This is my project now. So welcome to Firebase. To connect your choose existing project or create a new one. So we'll create a new one, so we can just continue, and here enable. No, we don't need to enable that, so we disable that. Continue, enable analytics, not at this point. Then create our project. So it's creating our project. So our project is ready. Now we have our project on Firebase. It's connecting with Android Studio, so we have to do that manually. Send. You can now use Firebase in your project. Okay, so let's go back to Android Studio. You see our project is connected, so let's add the Android the Firebase SDK that we'll be needing for this project. I don't think he added that automatically. Let's have a look. Not yet. Check click here. So let's add that. So we're going to add all these libraries and dependencies for our project. So as you can see, he added all the Google services that we need. So the next thing, since we've added that and our project is syncing, then we can add Firestore, because once we authenticate the user, we want to create a collection for the user, so to collect their details, which we are going to create for them to update later. So let's add Cloud Firestore is connected. Let's add the SDK, accept changes. We've added Firestore as well. So that's it for now. Yeah, that's it for now. We'll add others when we need them. Okay, let's give that some time to sync, and let's go back to Firebase. It's now giving us this local host. So let's open our Burgers app. So it's still sending us back to connect. We have already done that. So what I will do is I will now let's cut out from this local host port, so and reload that. I think it's going to, yeah. So we are now back into our app. So right here, let's add our authentication. Let's get started. So we are going to sign in with Google, enable that, and so before we do this, let's quickly connect our share certificate, share 1 certificate, which is asking us for here. So let's go to this project settings, come down here, add fingerprint. Let's go to Android Studio and check our Gradle. Have I done that before? No. So let's search for anything. So Google's Gradle sign in report. Am I typing it wrong? Okay, this is how you get your Gradle sign in report. So we copy this SHA-1 certificate, copy that, go back to Firebase and paste that here. So it has recognized that. We save that. So now our project is connected. We go back to authentication and sign in method. Let's set up sign in method with Google, enable that. So we select the email, then save. It's going to add this JSON file. We'll check. If we don't, we'll come back here and download it back. Then another sign in method we should add here is anonymous, because we're going to let our users sign in anonymously. So these are the 2 sign in methods that we're going to be using. Let us also start our Firestore database that is going to create our customer collections in. Okay, create database, standard edition, next. Yeah, I'll just leave everything the way it is. Start test mode. We'll set the Firebase security rules later. Okay, so let's just continue. So this is activated to accept our collection. So now we can say that we are ready to implement our Google Auth. So all our dependencies has been added. So let's check if the google.json file was added to our project. Okay, yeah. So the Google services.json has been added. So we are good to go. The next thing we need to do is to create our Google UI client, which is going to be our authentication module that we're going to use to communicate to Google via Firebase in order to authenticate our users and create new users or accept users who have already been authenticated before into our app so that they can explore our app, and also implement the guest use. So, but before we do that, let's arrange our structure. It's not looking too bad now, but I decided to compress the structure because our app is not going to be that big. I want to create some packages, so I'm going to move this to the DI to the core so that the DI becomes part of the core. In our core now, we're going to have more packages for our data and our DI. So let's create another package in our core that we're going to call data, right? So in this data file, in this data package, I mean to say, we are going to have the auth package where we're going to create this Google Gogo UI client shortly. So let's call this auth. And as well, inside this package, the data package, again, we need another package that we're going to call domain. So inside this domain, this domain is going to hold all our repositories. So shortly we'll create the customer repository. You see what I mean? So now the next one is that we need to create our model. So our data classes that are going to be our models are going to be inside this model package. So this customer, I've added this customer file to minimize time because this video is taking longer than I expected. So this is our customer package. These are all the things that we need from the customer. So I've just added this in the folder, so you can just pause this and write this for yourself. Okay, so now this customer data class is going to be part of our model. It's going to be one of our models, so for the customer. So the next thing we need here is that our repositories are going to have some repository implementation. So we need to create another package where we put all our repository implementations. So I will call that repo implementation, just like that. So now this structure, this data has been completed. So now that the data have been completed, so inside this core now we have our data package which houses all these other packages, and now we have our DI. So that's the core done. So inside the feature package, inside the feature, we're going to have a couple of packages as well. Initially I created this UI as part of the feature, but I have decided to not do it that way and again. So I will move this navigation as a top level package of the feature. So now I will delete this UI. We have our splash package, we have our component, we have our two buttons, and we have our auth. So in this auth, we are going to have the screen and the view model. Same with the splash doesn't have any view model. So let's create the home package where we'll put our home view model by the time we create that, so that it will be easier for us to know where everything is home. And let's move the home screen, because I also added this home screen to buy us some time. It's just there's nothing there really, so it's just a test and column, so just for us to be able to show when the authentication is successful that the user is now in the home screen. Okay, so there's nothing fancy about it. So our navigation is here, so all our features, all our UI elements are going to be part of this feature. So then our data sources are going to be in the data, so we have all our data sources here. So we're not going to implement the domain layer because like all those use cases and map, we're not going to do that in this project. So that's why I've just decided to make these two core and feature. Okay, so we now proceed to creating our Google UI client. So for we to do that effectively, we want to create our customer. So now we have added the customer file here, the customer data class here. So let's create our customer repo that we're going to use in collecting and creating our users, and also checking if our user have been initially authenticated. So let's do that now. So in our domain model, in our domain package, keep using model, we're going to have an interface which is going to be our customer repository. So it's going to be an interface, and we'll call that customer repository. So this our customer repository is going to have two functions for now. We'll get some more later, but we need two for now. So it's going to be get current user to find an already authenticated user, right? Get current user ID. So we find them by their ID, which is a unique ID that is going to be generated by Firebase. Okay, and this ID can be nullable in case the user. So then again, we'll have another suspend function which is going to create our new user in case the user have not been previously authenticated, right? So customer, and it's going to have a parameter which is user, and it's going to be a Firebase user. Then it's going to return a result which is going to be a unit, right? So now this is the two functions that we have in our customer repository for now. So let's now create our customer repo implementation, which is going to be how we want to collect this user and how we wish to verify if this user have been previously authenticated or get the user ID, right? So we go to our repo implementation, we create another file, a class that we'll call customer repo implementation, just like that. Okay, so customer repo implementation is going to inherit from customer repo Z3. Yeah, so now it's going to ask us to implement the two functions, so we just accept that. So now in this, to get the current user ID, we just say Firebase Auth dot get instance. We get the instance of the user dot current user, which is nullable dot UID, right? So this is how we'll check if the user have already been authenticated. Okay, so we can just assign this straight up and that's fine. Okay, so that error is gone. So now for this create user, we're going to assign this to run catching. So this run catching calls the specified function block with this value as its receiver and returns its encapsulated result if invocation was successful. So catching any throwable exception that we might encounter when we're trying to create our new user. Okay, so here we create a variable which we'll call customer collection, and we'll assign that to Firebase .firestore, because that's where we're going to create our customer collection in the Firestore. So firestore.collection. So we create a collection path which is going to be our customer collection path, because we'll have other collection paths as we proceed in this project. So here we create another variable which we'll call document reference equal to customer collection dot document. So here we pass the user dot UID. Okay, so that's the document, how we reference our document for each customer that was created. Then we take a snapshot. A snapshot is equal to docref.get. So we'll get a snapshot of the user. And then here, after that, we check if not snapshot, that means there is no snapshot of the user that exists in our collection, then we create a new user. So that's what that condition means there. So here we're going to say customer, then we pass the basic parameters, the one that are compulsory, which is the user's ID to identify each user collection and map it with the user name that already exists in our authentication. So then first name, we're going to split the collection, because usually when you create an account on Google, you're going to have, usually you have a first name and a last name. So we need to split that here. So we say user dot display name. So whatever is the display name of the user in their Google account, that should be nullable.split. So we use a regular expression to split it in the spaces, because once the name is collected, they are joined together with spaces, with a space in between. So we collect the first name, so we dot first or null. So or if the user has no first name, which is unlikely for Google accounts, let's return unknown. But it's unlikely that the user does not have a first name, in my experience. We also do the same for the last name of the user, because we want to assign it differently in our collection. So this is going to be last or null. Then if there is no last name as well, you should also return unknown. Then lastly, we also collect the user's email, which we do the same. We don't need to split the email. So email, or if no email, then unknown. But this is always unlikely unless they are checking our application as guest, which we are going to implement in the future. That is when all these things will come as unknown, because it will sign the user in without any automatic authentication. So now we return our docref.set. So we set our document reference to the customer, then await coroutine. So we await for that process to finish. So then if customer exists, then we are done. So let's treat this as sources and return a unit. Okay, so this is how our customer repo implementation is going to look like, and that is done now. So we've created our customer in the model, created our customer repository, and now we have created our customer repo implementation, which is very wonderful. So now we're going to create our Google UI client, which is the next thing we're going to do. So the UI client is processing our data with Google and Firebase. So we add that to our data class here, and we create that class here, which we will call Google UI, even though it's a UI operation, but we still put it here for proper separation of concern. So here the UI client is going to have some parameters. So we need context. So it's going to be private var context, and we import context and context. Is that the right one? I guess so. I think it's this one. Yeah. So here, after that, we have private var, we have the auth, and that's going to be our Firebase auth. And finally, we have a private var server client ID, which is going to get our web client ID. So just like this. So down here, we're going to use Credential Manager to manage our authentication in this demonstration. So the Credential Manager automatically prompts the user to sign in using their existing Google account. So if we implement this, it's going to call up a bottom modal navigation that is going to pull up the customer's existing Google account that is registered in the device they are using. And once they select an account, that is now routed through Firebase, and then we create our user as we have just done in our repo implementation here. So let's start putting all those together now. So we create a variable private var that we're going to call cred manager, which is our credential manager by lazy, and this is going to be credential manager dot companion dot create. Then we pass our context. Okay, so that with that done, we create a suspend function which we'll call sign in with Google. So, and that sign in requires activity as parameter, not the main activity, the activity, Android activity. Then this is going to return an auth result from Firebase auth result. Then in the body, we're going to create a variable called Google ID option that will give the option for the Google ID. Then pass that to call the function get Google ID options dot builder. This is how we instantiate our Google option. We also call our set server client ID, then pass the server client ID that we've created up. So this server client ID, we're going to call that in our Koin module that is going to pull up the server client ID, which is a string from, if you remember, from this Google services.json that was added when we connected our project to Firebase. So that is what this is going to do to get our web client ID that is going to make the authentication possible. So after that, we're going to now filter by authorized. So set filter by authorized account. So if we set this to true, it's going to allow only authenticated users. That means people who have already created an account previously, but that's not what we want, because we want new users and old users to have access to our application. So we set this to false for now. Then after that, we call build, right? So now that we've created this function, we now create some variables, which is the request variable that is going to request that is going to start the credential request for Google. So down here we have var, down here, so it's all within the suspend function. So we have var request, we call that request, so we equal to get credential request cred.builder. I think I've imported the wrong credential request. So let's try to do that, import that again. Is it this one? Okay. We also add our credential options, which is this credential Google ID option that we have created up here. So then now that we've passed that, we'll now call build again. So we move along to get the results of this transaction that we have just initiated above. So then we pass that to call our cred manager. So cred manager that we've created above dot get credential, then we pass our activity and the request that we've created. So now with this result, we can now go to our Google credential. So we create another variable that we'll call Google cred to get the Google credential of the user, equal to when var cred is equal to our result dot credential, then I think I need to make this uppercase, is custom credential. Yeah, so Android custom credential is equal to, we set this into, in the lambda we say that if cred dot type is assigned to Google ID token credential dot companion dot type Google ID token credential, that's the right type. So we should go to Google companion dot create form, then we pass our cred dot data that was returned from the user's account. So else, if that wasn't possible, then we should pass error. So then unsupported credential type. So since we are using Google, in case the person selects but definitely it's going to pull out the Google account and ignore the others. But in case the person uses another account that is not Google, then it can now return that this is an unsupported credential type. Okay, so and now we'll pass our cred.type, return the type to the user. Then if not, we should all return else. We should also return the error. So it could be an unsupported credential class. So in that regards, we have our result dot credential class dot java dot name. So whatever class you use, the wrong class, we should return the name. So at the end of it all, we now create our var id token equal to Google cred dot id token. Okay, so now that we've gotten the id token, var dot, so we'll create var Firebase credential. We can now pass it to Firebase and say Firebase credential is equal to Google Auth provider dot get credential. Then we pass our ID token and null in case nothing was returned. Okay, I missed I here. So now that we have passed this to Firebase, we're going to return auth dot sign in with credential, then pass our Firebase credential, and now await using coroutine to wait for this process in case something else is running on the main thread when we initiated this, so that we don't have race conditions. So that's it for our the signing with Google function up here. So this signing with Google also manages our sign up or sign in request the same time with the credential manager. So we can also create another function, enable our users to sign out, or the guest, sorry, before that, let's do the guest sign in first of all. So for users who want to sign in as guests, so that we just create the function here so that when we go to our UI, we can just pull them out immediately and make our implementation faster. So here we'll call auth dot sign in anonymously dot await. If you remember that when we connected our project to Firebase, we also included anonymous sign in as one of our sign in methods. So that's how this is when this function is called, it's going to create that anonymous user that doesn't have name or email or whatever, but they are going to have a unique ID, so that in case they decide to sign up, or in our app, when we go to our profile, we can give them a call to action to prompt them to sign up fully, so that we can get the rest of their detail. But at least with this anonymous signing, we can also track their behavior in our application. If they buy something, we can still get the product details and all that. So that's why this is also a very good user experience. So lastly, we are going to create a function for our users to also sign out in case they are done with us or done with the app. Here we'll implement sign out. So it's just going to be auth.signout, nothing fancy, but we also want to clear any cache state once they sign out, so that they don't come back to meet stale data in our application. So we also clear it. So say cred manager dot clear credential states. So in that, we pass the clear credential state request function like this. So it will wipe out any cached signing states that have been saved, because once they sign in, we want them to stay signed in. So we need to clear that once they sign out, so that they don't come back to meet some stale data. So after that, lastly, we can say get current user, val current user .get. We call get and assign that to auth.current user in case we want to pull any current user in our application somewhere down the line. So that's our Google UI client done. So now we have implemented this. The next thing to do is to go to our UI and create the auth view model, which is going to collect the state of all this our data implementation for proper separation of concern. So now in our auth, inside here, we're going to create our view model class here. So in our view model class, we'll call it auth view model. That's a better name, right? So this auth view model is going to have its own parameters, which is the private val customer repository, and that will be customer repository, then private val auth, and that will be our Firebase auth. So in this, we're going to first of all we'll collect the UI event from our authentication. So there we have private val UI state, or we'll call a UI event. We'll assign that to mutable state flow. We'll pass null, but we're going to assign the type, which is result, and the result is going to be just a unit. Okay, so and this is nullable. Then let's expose that UI event in our UI event, and this is going to be state flow, and pass the type auth UI event, which we have not created. Auth UI event right here, and we'll assign that to our UI event. So let's create this auth UI event, and it's going to be part of our data auth, because it's going to, so the UI event is going to be part of our auth. Let's put that here. So it's going to be a sealed class that we're going to call auth UI event. So let's make this a sealed class. So in this UI event, we're going to collect all our data objects. We'll call this idle in case the app is idle, doing nothing. So it's going to inherit from the auth UI event. And let me just copy this and paste it 2 more times. So this one is going to be loading, and this is going to be success. So then finally, we're going to have a data class, which is going to be error, and it's going to have a variable called message, and it's going to be a string. So it also inherits from our auth UI event. So that's just it. That's our auth UI event for now, and we can close that down. So right here, these have been imported. So we move forward to completing our auth view model. So now that we've created that, we need to create some function to start loading and also to consume the events that is going to be sent. Down here we create a function to start loading, and in that body we'll call our auth UI event dot value and assign that to auth UI event dot loading. So that's what our function is going to look like. Here, instead of returning results, like you can see, it's complaining. So it says that assignment type mismatch. Actual type is auth UI event loading, not result unit. So here we're returning the result instead of our auth UI event, and then when nothing is happening, we need to set our event to be idle. So auth UI event dot idle, right? So that's all fixed, right? So now we need another function to consume the event. So we'll call our auth UI event again dot value, then assign that to auth UI event dot idle again. So when the event has finished and has been consumed. So the next one is for error. So emit error. So here we're going to pass the parameter, which is our message, and it's still a string. Then here we pass our auth UI event dot value, then assign that to auth UI event dot error, then we pass our message here. Okay, let's make this a single line. So that's all done. So let's create the function that what will happen on Firebase sign-in. So we call that on Firebase user sign-in when the user is finally signed in. So on Firebase user sign-in, so the user parameter, then our Firebase user style, then inside the function we have our auth UI event dot value was assigned that to auth UI event dot loading. So now under that we call a view model scope. Yeah, so we can't call view model scope because initially our class doesn't inherit from view model, which is my bad. Okay, don't forget to add this up in your own project if you're following along. So now our view model scope can be imported .launch, then we import launch as well. So now we create a variable here that we're going to call result, which is going to be the result returned, and the result we want is that the customer repository .create customer should be called, and then we pass our user here. So then if result, which is the user, is success, then we should call auth UI event dot value again and assign that to auth UI event dot success. Okay, so once our user is created, we should make the auth UI event is now successful, so should return success in our UI. So that's it. Then else val, let's create a message if we couldn't get a new user or something happened in the backend. So exception or null, which is nullable dot message, or will return could not create customer. So now then we call our auth UI event dot value, then assign that to auth UI event dot error because our user couldn't be created, then pass the message. Okay, so this is our auth view model. Everything here is done and we are happy with it. So the next thing we need to do now is to connect our UI, which is our auth screen here, to what we have just created, so that it can read the event that is coming from the view model and interpret it in our UI accordingly. To do that, let's go to our we are now in our authentication screen. So first of all, after the authentication, we want the user to navigate to home, to our home screen once they were successfully authenticated. Okay, so then this is going to be a unit. So to get that, we need to pass some activity because our Google UI requires an activity. So we create an activity variable here again, and we assign that to context as activity. Okay, so in this context have imported the wrong context. Where are you? Show yourself. We need to send you home. So first of all, we need to get access to our local context here. So we need another variable called context here, and we assign that to local context dot current. Okay, so that's fine. Then we need a coroutine for our sign-in button. So val we call scope equal to, remember, coroutine scope. Yeah, that's fine. So now let's all inject our view model into our UI, which is our screen. So let's add a little comment here. Inject with Koin. I think that's the best thing. Let's inject with Koin. So here we're going to create a variable called auth view model. Yeah, and we're going to say auth view model, and we say Koin inject or Koin view model. Okay, so then we create another variable for our Google UI client, and we call our Google UI client, and we'll assign that to Koin inject. So we're going to inject that with Koin, right? So now that we've finished with that, we need to use launch effect to monitor our state from the auth view model and the auth UI state. So we'll create another variable that we're going to call UI event by auth view model dot UI event dot collect our states with life cycle. So now we need to the setter and the getter. So get value, that's fine. So we're going to use launch effect to monitor this event, and so that it can be propagated accordingly in our UI. So launch the effect, and we pass our UI event as the key, and in the body we use a when statement. So when UI event is true, then is UI event success. So if the UI event is true, that means something was passed or a user was created. So what do? We navigate to home, then also auth view model dot consume the event. So the auth view model should consume the event afterward. So is error, if it's error, nothing was returned, then we should also, the auth view model should consume the event and refresh it to the beginning so that the user can try again. Then else should return an empty unit. So with that done, now we can now go to our Google button. So our Google button here requires a loading because we need to do that swap. If you remember, in our Google button, there's this swap that we initiated here for this icon and the circular progress indicator. So we need a loading state here. So let's create that up here, and we call our val loading equal to UI event is auth UI event dot loading. Okay, so now to collect that event, once the event has started loading, then we pass our loading here, and in the body, this is where the magic happens. We need to use a coroutine to launch this process once this Google button is clicked. So we call scope that we created above before dot launch, and in that scope we'll first of all call our auth view model to start loading once the button is clicked. So to check if we'll find anything, then we'll try to check that. So we create a variable first of all that we'll call auth result, and in the auth result we'll assign our Google UI client, Google auth. Is that what I called it? What did I call it? Okay, this is supposed to be Google auth UI client. So down here, our Google auth UI client dot sign in with Google, which is the suspend function that we created, and it requires an activity. So we pass the activity here. So now, if let's create another variable called user and assign it to auth result dot user to get the user. So we now say if user is not null, that means our authentication have found a user, right? Then we should say auth view model dot on Firebase user signing. So this on Firebase user signing is from our view model here. So now once the user is signed in, we should pass the user that was signing, so return their data. Okay, so but if that doesn't happen, that means we hit a roadblock in that process, we should return auth viewModel.emit error. So, and tell the user, sorry, Google sign in failed. Unfortunately, something must be wrong somewhere. Check your network, check your other implementations to find out what went wrong. So here we say catch. If everything failed, it didn't even start, then we say we'll catch the exception. What happened? Why it didn't even start? So it might be from our implementation. So we also emit the error here, and we pass our message, or we return a simple text that says sign in error. Okay, all right. So with that said, now I assume this button is working, but for time's sake, let's since we have created the function in our Google UI client to sign in as guests, let's also implement that immediately so that we can move on as quickly as possible. So down here in the primary button, we are going to also use scope again to launch our request. Here we'll try then auth viewModel dot start loading, because this is also a loading process. So var res, that's the results. We have used results up here before, so let's just use, or let's just say guest result. Okay, we assign that to our Google Auth UI client dot get sign in. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so then we also create that user, find that user. So once that process happens successfully, so guest result dot user, okay, we should return the user. So now if the user is not null, that means our guest signing was also successful, then we should return the same thing as before, auth viewModel dot on Firebase signing. Okay, so then pass the user, the guest user. Okay, so it's almost the same process as before, but just that this user doesn't have any Google account. So here auth viewModel.emit error again, we emit the error, then the error could be a simple message, guest sign in also failed. So now we also have to catch the exception, and in that exception we're going to emit the error again, and here e.message. So, and now we have a guest sign in error. I have to check our guest sign in implementation as well. So as you can see, we're using a single auth viewModel for these two implementations, so that once the Firebase sign in, because both of them are definitely signing in, so we'll call this in the guest signing as well. So with that said and done, I guess we are good to go, except for one thing which we have not done, which is we need to update our auth screen. So now our auth screen has, and our DI, our auth screen has navigate to home. So now we're going to check our navigation and update our navigation as well. So we have auth screen, we have home screen. So we created the home screen and added the home screen here. Yeah, so if you haven't got that, you should just add something here so that we can see something when they are fully navigated. So in the auth screen, first of all, our navigation is going to be like this. So we're going to say navigate, or not nav controller, navigate to home. Then in that lambda, we're going to call our nav controller dot navigate, and we're going to call our screens dot home graph. Yeah, that's where we want to send the user to after a successful navigation. Then we need to pop up to the back stack so that the user cannot go back once they have navigated, and we pass our screen that we want to pop off. So, and that's our auth screen. So once the user is in the home screen, we shouldn't let them to come back. So then finally, let's create that composable for our home screen so that they can also find it. So call our home screen here. So don't remember to pass the type, which is screens dot home graph. Oh, this is screens. Okay, so I think everything looks fine here, and let's check the auth screen, and that's guest navigation. we navigate to home. Okay, so we pass that in our launched effect. So once this Auth UI event is successful, it should send to home. So once we don't need to call out down here nor here. So the launch effect is listening to changes in our state. So it will now take the right action once it's done. Let's run it and see if everything is fine or if we're missing something somewhere. Okay, our app launched successfully. That means we did everything we should have done. And the moment of truth. Oh, it's taking me home. That's not what it should be. Okay, let's delete that app and check our splash screen. Okay, let's check our splash screen before we launch our app again and see if we've done something funny there. Okay, so what happens when this navigate to auth? Okay, that should be fine. Let's see. Okay, our app is crashing. Something is wrong somewhere. You know what's wrong? I know. Let's check. I think we have not implemented our DI. Our DI can't find, so no definition found for the type. Auth view model. Check your module's configuration and add missing type or qualifier. Okay, we missed that out. Our module class. We did not implement. There's nothing in our module, so the app can't find anything. So where's our module class again? Right here. So you can see our module class cannot see our view model or our repositories implementation. And even our Google Auth UI, it cannot see. So for that reason, it's not going to go anywhere. That's why the app keep crashing. So first of all, we need to instantiate our Firebase, and the type is going to be Firebase Auth. Then here we'll call our Firebase auth.getInstant to get instance of each user. Okay, so then after that, we also need our repository. So single, then the type here is going to be customer repository as well, and then we call our customer repository implementation just like this. Okay, then after that, we call our view model as well. So view model, then we pass our auth view model, and inside our auth view model we call get. And now we also have the auth parameter as well in our view model, so we call get for both of them. Let me close these things down and see why it's complaining. So what's it asking us to do? So I think I've seen the error. I imported the wrong view models. We need the view model, the Koin DSL view model. That's why this is messing up. Okay, so let's find that. Yeah, so this is the right view model, the Koin, the module DSL view model. That's why it was complaining all along. Let's close this down. So after that, the next thing we need here is to also instantiate our Google Auth UI client from here as well. So here we're going to call Google Auth UI client like this, and inside that we have some parameters, which is context. So we pass the Android context here. Then also we need the auth, and we pass to get the auth. Then after that we have our server client ID, and which is going to be Android context dot get string r dot string. So this r is default web client ID. So this R is going to be from the R. This R is going to be the one we created of our folder. So the default web client ID. So let's import our default web client ID dot default web client ID here. Okay, so I guess that's everything we need for this application to run. And let's give it a quick run here. Let me close all this thing down and only open what we need when we need it. So now is the moment of truth. Let's see if our app will crash again. Our app did not crash, so we have successfully taken care of that. So let's try to sign in with Google. You can see, yes, it's pulling up our account, and we'll say continue, and now it's coming. and we are home. So bravo, we did it. So now our application can navigate to home successfully. So let's relaunch our app and see if we can log in as guests. Okay, so let's try the guest login. All right, so our guest login is also working as well. So now let's check our Firebase console and see if we have created a new user on our app or not. So as you can see, we have created an anonymous user today, and also we have created a user with an email at the same time. So let's check our Firebase database. There's no collection in our Firebase database. I think I've deleted that. So let's delete this and do it one more time and see if our collection will also be created at the same time. Okay, so now we have a clean slate. There's nothing here and there's nothing here. Okay, so let's go back to our app, close the app, launch again. All right, so let's sign in with Google and see. Continue. Okay, so our application have signed in successfully with Google. Let's check. So let's refresh this. So you see that worked. So let's check our Firebase collection. Yeah, a new customer has been created with these details. Okay, so let's try the anonymous sign in and see how that works. So we relaunch this application again to start from the beginning. Okay, so browse as guest. All right, so we're logged in as guests now. So if you have a look here, you see another user have been created, and you can see all the data points are empty, unknown. So but we have a user ID. So whatever this user does on our application, buys something, we'll be able to monitor what they are doing here and also reference to that in case they decide to sign up as users. So if we go back to authentication, you see here anonymous. So there is no email, but there is also a user UID here to track the user. With that, we can say we've comfortably implemented our Google sign-in and also the sign-in as guest function in our application. So the next thing we can do now is to make sure that once a user is signed in, like you can see, once we refresh this application, the user is signed out. And if you go here, we bounce back to authentication. We want to make sure that any user who have signed in before as either user or as guest can also continue where they left off. Okay, looking not too bad, but we'll have some adjustment to make in our landscape, but that's not our focus right now. Let's implement this. So to implement that, we have already implemented in our Auth Google UI client to get our current user. So what we can do now to implement that is simply to go to our splash screen. It's not much work to be done there. We just go to our splash screen and add another option, which is for the user. Let's close this down. So now close this down, close this, then our splash screen here. So in our splash screen, we want the user to also navigate to home from our splash screen once they have been initially authenticated. So navigate to home, and that's return a unit. So after that, we need to create a variable for our Firebase Auth to inject Firebase that is provided in our Koin module. Okay, so here we say Firebase Auth, and we assign that to Koin inject, just like this. Okay, so every other thing stays the same. We just simply go to our one click here and create that condition. So here we just create a user. So user, then we'll call Firebase Auth dot current user. So either way we want to initiate this, we can still call here. We can still say Google Auth UI client as we did in our Auth screen. So instead of calling Firebase Auth directly here, we can call our Google UI client, then we inject using Koin, because if you check here, we have this variable here which is also calling the Firebase Auth the current user. So we can still use that implementation and it will still work fine here. So if we call Google UI client or current user, it still fulfills the purpose. So let's set the condition to choose which screen the user can navigate to once it's a current user. So when the user is not null, then the user should navigate to home. So that means the user has been authenticated, right? So else, then they should go to the auth screen and okay, so that's all. So you see how simple that is, just because we've created all our functions here. So the next thing when we create our user profile is to give them the option to sign out, which is going to be from, I guess, let's look at our Figma design again. So in our Figma design, now we have implemented this and this. So this is not coming next. So in this place, we can also implement the sign out here, give them option to update their details and all that. So now let's test what we have built. Then we can now see how we're moving further from this. So I'm predicting the app will take us to home straight up because, we need to implement our navigation again, the navigate to home, which is going to be navigate to home. Then in that lambda does the same thing, dot navigate, and we pass our screens dot home graph, right? So then let's not forget to pop up to, so that they can go back to the screen. I'm doing this outside the lambda. So pop up to, so inclusive, we signed out to true, right? So then the type here, which screen type do we want to pop off? We want to pop off our auth screen. Okay, so with that, I guess we can safely navigate to our home screen without errors. Okay, so that's why our app crashed, because the user has been authenticated and can't find its way to the all right, moment of truth. Okay, started from the beginning, we click, it goes home, so meaning that the user have been authenticated already. Okay, so let's test that one more time and see if it works for the guest signing. Okay, so let's run this again. Now we're back here where we started. Now we're logged in. Let's rerun the app again. So everything works as it should. So now we've completed the episode 2 of our food app. So the next thing we should be looking into, we're going to be looking into creating our bottom navigation. We have done our bottom navigation, then our custom drawer. So we're going to create this bottom navigation, create the custom drawer, and also the profile screen, this one here, for the user to update these other details that are missing. So that is what we're going to do on the next episode. And make sure you subscribe and also click that bell notification to get notified once this episode is live. So, and I wish you a happy learning, and we'll keep moving. Okay, see you on the next one. So I'm going to push all this project to the development tree in our GitHub. So if you have seen the main branch is the starter repo, which was the first episode. So this one is going to the development tree, and that is where you can find all these extra add-ons that we're doing. So I'm going to commit all that. So we're committing about 16 files. So this is going to be, what did we add? Google UI, Auth UI client, and sign in as guest, or let's call it guest signing, and persisting authenticated user. Okay, so let's just leave it like that. Then let's commit this. So we have committed 16 files. Checking, ignore all these warnings. They are basically the things that we have not used. Auth is never used. Unimported directive. Let me optimize that and check what's here. Sign out is never used. We're going to use that later. So ignore the rest and let's move on. So let's push this. Also, we've committed it initially, so let's push this to our development repo. So our GitHub repository is also up to date, so you can check that out if you are following along. Okay, so on the next episode we continue where we left off. I'll see you on that new episode.